evening, everyone, and welcome. I was joking, now that I'm a mom, this is like past my bedtime, so I'm feeling very rebellious here with all of you. Thank you all for coming to my presentation of Magic Lantern Tales, a song cycle by incredible British composer Cheryl Frances Hode. My hope with this recital, in conjunction with my DMA document, is to bring recognition to Cheryl Frances Hode as a composer, as well as her vocal work, especially this cycle. I've always found art song as a genre to be a compelling form of communication and storytelling. This is the American premiere of this song cycle, and I'm greatly looking forward to sharing this captivating new music with all of you. I find that it's very important to perform new works because there's so much being written. When I decided that I wanted to do my research on a new composer, I found so many people and perspectives that I didn't even know were out there. Song is a living and breathing medium right now, and we hinder ourselves and our audiences if we only perform what is traditional. While it may take a bit of stepping out of our comfort zones, I think the reward of expanded horizons is worth it. Obviously, Cheryl Frances Hode was one of my favorites of the current composers I looked into, seeing as I've chosen to write about her and perform her music. For many of you, this will be an introduction to her music, and I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I have. Cheryl Frances Hode is an award-winning composer who's been writing by commission since age 15. Born in Essex, England in 1980, her journey with music began at age 6, when she heard a cello on the radio and immediately knew that was the instrument she wanted to pursue. Her mother was a flute teacher, and she was exposed to classical music seemingly from in the womb. After proving that she would practice her recorder for a year, her mother purchased the much more desirable instrument, the cello. Within weeks of receiving her new cello, Cheryl had already composed her first piece for open strings. She went on to study cello and piano on scholarship at the Yehudi Menuhin School in Surrey. By age 15, she had won the prestigious BBC Young Composer of the Year competition with her concertino for cello, piano, percussion, and orchestra. Upon hearing her piece played by the BBC Philharmonic, she said of the experience, quote, "The buzz of knowing I'd written all those notes that everybody was playing was more thrilling than any performances I'd done as a cellist. It was just mind-blowing to hear something that I'd only heard in my head played by a massive orchestra. The experience was spine-tingling and convinced me that this was what I had to do for the rest of my life." That same year, she received her first professional commission from the International Cello Festival, for which she wrote The Prophecy for cello and piano. Apart from some Christmas carols and school assignments, one of which she won an award for, she came to writing for voice later on. She attended Cambridge and of course wrote a fair amount of choral work there. The first songs she really wrote for voice were those in her song cycle One Life Stands in 2011, a reaction to Schumann's Frauenliebe und Leben. Since then, she's received many commissions to write vocal works and has said that she loves working with words. She loves the images they evoke and working with current poets. She describes her vocal writing as very intuitive. She'll write out the poetry herself and then improvise a melody based on the imagery and shape of the words. A motive will surface and she'll develop it from there. I recently spoke with Cheryl, and she described her process to be like constructing a table. You want it to be beautiful, but you also need it to function. It can be a delicate dance making that happen. This particular cycle was commissioned by Joseph Middleton and the 2016 Leeds Leader Festival. When Cheryl was given full freedom for the topic, she was drawn to a collection of poems by poet and broadcaster Ian McMillan. A few years prior, Ian had complimented Cheryl on one of her pieces on Twitter. She tweeted back, and they ended up meeting for coffee, where he gave her some of his poetry. One of his collections was based on World War I. When she received the Leeds Leader Commission in 2015, this collection, Magic Lantern Tales, immediately came to mind, as we had just passed the 100th anniversary of the Great War breaking out. Cheryl was ecstatic to work with Ian McMillan. He's a famous poet in the UK and is affectionately referred to as the Bard of Barsley. Magic Lantern Tales is a collection of poems in response to interviews conducted by social documentary photographer Ian Beasley. I'll explain how the interviews came about in his words. Quote, "In 1994, I was appointed artist in residence at the Moore Psychiatric Hospital in Lancaster and worked on the unit specifically for the care of the extreme elderly. The majority of the patients suffered from senile dementia or Alzheimer's. Many had been in the Moore for decades. Many still held memories of the First World War. The hospital was in the process of closing down, and a number of wards in the unit were being emptied. On one such ward, I found a chest of drawers. In the top drawer was a selection of old glasses. In the drawer beneath was a collection of old photographs. Many of the photographs were related to World War I, soldiers in uniform, family gatherings, and weddings with the grooms in uniform. The ward orderly told me the glasses and photographs were those of patients who had died in the hospital who had unfortunately no living relatives. Their last few personal possessions were placed carefully into the drawers. These glasses were the glasses they must have used to look at their fading photographs, perhaps to attempt to pull back some fading memory. Two simple wooden drawers containing a visual eulogy to forgotten lives. This experience prompted me to photograph and interview as many men and women who had experienced the First World War before it was too late. These are some of their stories." End quote. Together, Beasley and McMillan produced a magic lantern show with an antique magic lantern and glass slides. The photographs and poetry tell a story of the First World War from the point of view of men who survived it and lived on to old age in a changing world, as well as women who worked in the factories that oiled the wheels of war. We often view war as a series of huge historical events. Both McMillan and Beasley intended to remind their audience that war is made up of individuals who each have their own narrative of what happened. These are the stories of normal people who led remarkable lives. In their Magic Lantern show, they projected pictures of these men and women, shared small portions of Beasley's interviews, followed by readings of McMillan's connected poetry. For greater context of the lives of these remarkable people, the lives that they led in such trying times, I will also share brief excerpts from their interviews intermittently throughout the cycle. I'll also share my own insights into Cheryl Frances Hode's gift of storytelling through music in this work. Cheryl told me that this cycle is some of her most accessible vocal work. Her hope was to convey these people's stories and express the empathy she felt as she sat with the poetry in the photos. She found the poetry to be quite emotive and didn't want to overcomplicate it with overtly modern ideas. One way she managed to do that was by finding inspiration in the folk-like melodies found in World War I popular music. She wanted to pay homage to music that these people would have felt a connection to, as well as the composers, some of which whose lives were also cut short by the war. The first piece, an introductory poem of Magic Lantern Tales, is Marching Through Time. Inspired by George Butterworth's The Lads in Their Hundreds, Marching Through Time shares the same introductory motive. Butterworth's contributions as a composer were cut short, as was his life, when he was killed by a German sniper in the First Battle of the Somme. Please enjoy this coupling of George Butterworth's The Lads in Their Hundreds, followed by Cheryl Frances Hode's Marching Through Time.
There's men from the barn and the forge and the mill and the fold. The
Florence Myers, 103 years old. Both my brothers fought on the Somme. When they came back, we couldn't recognize them. They were so thin and dirty. They were completely lousy. My mom made them strip off in the backyard, cut off all their hair, and scrubbed them raw with a yard brush. I burnt all their clothes. They never spoke of their experiences. They went off to the war as naught but boys, but came back as old men with dull, dead eyes. It broke my heart. They went as my brothers and came back as strangers.
They march through the streets of these
I believe Cheryl has done an incredible job of doing just what Macmillan and Beasley aimed to in their Magic Lantern show. With the folk-like influence of the tune from the Lads in Their Hundreds, transporting us back to that time and paying homage to Butterworth, she simultaneously satisfies our ears with the modern flair of chromaticism, surprising harmonies, and other effects. The poetry itself is descriptive of a scene, and Cheryl employs a great deal of text painting and imagery, which make all the songs in the cycle that much more pictorial. One specific effect is created by the constant pedal and relatively little accompaniment. The voice is meant to resonate in the strings of the piano, creating the effect of a voice echoing from the past. The initial pedal tone represents a bell, as though the tolling of a church or town hall bell is bringing a moment of time back to the remembrance of the narrator. She quotes the last post, the bugle call that sounds at the end of the day. This same call is used at military funerals. This use of the text painting brings to mind a specific image and suggests a feeling of reverent remembrance. This song appears again at the end of the cycle. Cheryl felt that the cycle needed some framing and imagined the narration to be like a classic storybook opening, where a voice introduces a story and returns again at its conclusion. This next song, Lily Maynard, is based on Ivor Novello's Keep the Home Fires Burning. Which Cheryl chose because of its representation of the women back home and their experience. The melody of the chorus is especially apparent in the lilting tunefulness of Lily's main motive. Cheryl said that writing this piece was particularly intuitive. She improvised a lot and wrote it very quickly. She described that with this piece, as with all her music, she tried to discover the character and then try to represent that character in notes and rhythms. In this song, I have come to walk with Lily. She has dementia and remembers best while walking. The line between characters becomes blurred because my character knows her intimately. I know the story perhaps better than she does at this point, and I too get lost in her emotions. The melody has a lot of disjunctive moments as Lily forgets. I repeat her name, continually calling her back to the moment and the memory. That initial lilting melody of the two of us walking returns again and again, each time with some kind of variation in relation to the text. One repetition that I found particularly impactful employs a foreboding accompaniment representing bombs being dropped, juxtaposed against the sweet, almost lullaby or nursery song type melody. The gut-wrenchingly eerie effect foreshadows Lily's tragedy. This song, like the last, is full of text painting, some obvious, some much more subtle. For example, Cheryl told me that she associates certain notes and keys with colors. That being said, when the poem describes a sunrise, she portrays that with an A major chord, because that's the key she associates with the color yellow. Some of the other word painting is much more obvious, and I think you'll pick up on a few of them. She explained that it can be a difficult balance because she wants it to be clear without Mickey Mousing it too much with overt onomatopoeia. I'll now perform for you Keep the Home Fires Burning by Ivor Novello, followed by Cheryl Frances Hode's Lily Maynard.
They were summoned from the hillside. They were called
Lily Maynard, 101 years old. I was walking back from the fair during a thunderstorm, and I could hear this crying coming from under the hedge. Well, it was a young man. He was petrified of the thunder. Well, I managed to coax him out and took him home. I liked him. He was a good-looking lad and ever so nice. We started going out. We were thinking of getting married when he went off to France, the song. He never came back. I can't bear to think about it. No, I never married. Couldn't. Some nights I still see him cowering under the hedge. Oh no, that's enough. You're here to take my photo. I have had my hair done and bought a new dress. I've borrowed the pearls. You tell me about your love life. Let's cheer up. Know any jokes?
Let's go walking.
This next song was inspired by Felix Powell's "Pack Up Your Troubles in Your Old Kit Bag and Smile, Smile, Smile." There are some clear rhythmic similarities, but most of all, these pieces convey the same jovial mood. In 1915, Powell's "Pack Up Your Troubles" won first prize in a competition for Best Morale Building Song, and was noted as perhaps the most optimistic song ever written. Cheryl Frances Hode's "The Ballad of Harry Holmes" shares a similar sentiment. Once again, she uses a great deal of text painting and imagery. You may find yourselves especially aware of the bird or the train in the piano. She has described many of her songs as miniature operas because she means to tell a story start to finish. I believe she accomplished this here beautifully. I'll now share a recording of "Pack Up Your Troubles," followed by a performance of "The Ballad of Harry Holmes." Harry Holmes, center, and his brother, on the left, at a training camp in Halifax. Harry was an assailant at Ypres and was decorated for bravery. One night, whilst trying to retrieve wounded colleagues from no man's land, he single-handedly captured 5 German soldiers. Harry Holmes returned to Bradford and worked as a painter and decorator. His best friend was Harry Ramsden, of fish and chip shop fame. Both Harrys liked to drink. Harry Ramsden married late in life, and his wife objected to their drinking. Missing his drinking companion, Harry Holmes told Harry R. to buy a dog. Then, every night he could walk the dog and meet Harry in the pub for a couple of pints, which he did for a number of years. When Harry R. died, his widow had to walk the dog. To her surprise, it led her straight round to the tap room of the local pub, where sat Harry Holmes. When he was 99 years old, Harry said, "I have had a fantastic life. I would do it all again, including the war. I will hang on until I reach 100, and then I'll call it a day." Harry celebrated his 100th birthday and died 2 days later. Switching gears back to a mood much more common for wartime, this next song was inspired by Cecil Cole's Elegy from his 3 Thomas More songs. Another tragic loss of a composer to the war. Coles was shot and killed by a German sniper while recovering casualties on the Western Front. I had a neat experience with this song that I wanted to share. I couldn't find the sheet music anywhere, which I was sad about because it's a gorgeous song. Ultimately, I reached out to the publisher, not thinking I would get very far, but they said they did have it, and just last week they were able to make it available for purchase. So that was a cool moment for me that I didn't think was going to happen. In Cheryl's song, inspired by Cole's Elegy, Mabel Walsh, imagery crops back up again in a big way. Cheryl saw the photo of Mabel Walsh and pictured her alone in a room with nothing but the sound of her thoughts and a ticking clock. The ticking clock and its occasional chimes are obvious in the accompaniment. As Mabel speaks and dreams about wishing things might have been different, the 2 hands at the piano become offset, as if out of time. It's a powerful image, her sitting there in a chair each day without a sound, apart from a ticking clock, remembering her life and occasionally slipping away into the dream of what her life may have been had it not been for the war that robbed her of her sweetheart. Please enjoy Elegy by Cecil Coles and Cheryl Frances Hode's Mabel Walsh.
When wearied wretches sink to sleep,
Mabel Walsh, 104 years old. I used to go out with Jack Priestley before he was famous. He was an argumentative bugger. He would argue black was white just for sheer enjoyment. Well, I had to jack him in. I met my fiancé in 1916. He was more my type. Quiet, a bit shy really, but a gentle soul. He was called up the year after. I was worried sick for him. He wrote as regular as he could. In 1918, he was loading a truck when he dropped down dead. There wasn't a mark on his body. Then a medic noticed a mark on the back of his head. A small piece of shrapnel had hit him, and he died instantly. I never married and have always kept his photograph on my bedside table. I have often wondered what might have been had he survived. I would have loved to have had some children.
Century skin.
Apart from a few minor differences, this next and final piece is nearly identical to the first. Like I mentioned earlier, Cheryl was hoping for somewhat of a bookend, and also something to bring us out of the intensity of Mabel Walsh and into a place of remembrance. As powerful as each individual story is, she wanted to provide a sense of closure. I found it interesting that while singing this final piece, although it is almost identical to the first, it is impossible to experience it in the same way after having gone through the rest of the cycle and hearing each individual story. I hope that my performance of this cycle has evoked its intended feeling of remembrance in some of you. I know I have found it compelling, especially at this point in our world's history with conflict seemingly mounting at every corner. I also hope I have provided you a proper introduction to Cheryl Frances Hode, her skillfulness as a composer, and her contribution to the genre of song, of which there is much more to be discovered. Before I sing this final song, I'd like to thank all of my professors here at OU, especially my professor Lorraine Ernest and my coach Dr. Elizabeth Avery. Of course, I have to thank the fabulous Michael Stafford at the piano. Thank you. I'm really grateful to all of my amazing colleagues that I've met here who've made my experience at OU really enriching. And of course I have to thank my incredible husband over here in the corner who I wouldn't be here without. And thank you to my family in Idaho who are caring for my toddler right now. Hi, Brooksy. Without further ado, this is Marching Through Time. Harold Hayward, 101 years old. I was on burial duty, hundreds and hundreds of men. I couldn't shovel that dirty, stinking mud onto their faces. I would turn them over and bury them face down. I got across into the German trenches, but had to come back. There was no support and only a few of us survived crossing no man's land. Michael Lally, 104 years old. The Western Front, Christmas 1914. It was cold, so cold sat in those trenches. The Germans had started singing Christmas carols, so we sung some back. I climbed up the fire step and peered across no man's land. I saw a German soldier about the same age as me, looking back. He waved, I waved back. They threw over some sausage, and we threw Christmas cake back. Some got out of the trench to meet in no man's land. I followed. They were the same as us, young, bewildered, homesick, and frightened. We showed each other photos of wives, children, families, and home. Then our officers shouted and opened fire. We ran back to the trenches. A couple of those officers vanished in the night. It was awful. Awful, but I survived a lot, didn't I?